and gentlemen, that was a very insightful conversation. And hello, everyone. My name is Bhavna Bhatia, and I shall be your host today for the evening for BWHR 40 Under 40 Award Ceremony. Well, now we shall begin with a very much awaited award ceremony and celebrate India's finest and future HR leaders who have joined the BW People 40 Under 40 Elite Club today. I request everyone to join the online conversations by using our hashtag HR40 Under 40 as one word. You can also watch us live on www.bwpeople.in or on facebook.com/bwbusinessworld. Before we get started, we'd like to thank our partners who've made this event possible. Thank you to our presenting partners, ADP, associate partners, Randstad India, Thyrocare and Tiger Hall, virtual event partner, Alman Vertex, real estate partner, Bhutani Infra, co-working partner, Springhouse Co-working, knowledge partner, Primus Partners. Thank you so much all for your support. With this, now I'd like to call on stage our jury chair, Sumant Sinha, founder, chairman, and managing director, ReNew, Pato, to join us here on stage and deliver the jury keynote address. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, for joining us today. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Bhavna. Thank you very much. And I'd like to start by saying a big thank you to Business World as well. I think not just from me as the jury chair, and not just from the participants, but from everybody listening in to this webcast, and hopefully people who will benefit in various ways for having put this whole event together. And frankly, I must say that when Business World had approached me for this some time back, it was a very intriguing and yet exciting thing to consider. Because HR is a very important area, and that's something that I have, as a business practitioner, come to recognize and realize over the many years. And I thought selecting the top 40 young HR leaders from all across India would be a very exciting endeavor, would be a very exciting activity to take part in. And I must tell everybody that that's the way it actually turned out. It was very, very interesting to go through all the people who'd applied, talk to several of them, and then sit down with the rest of the jury and make decisions. I must compliment Business World for having put together this whole event. Also had to have put together the very distinguished jury that they have done. It was very rewarding also to discuss all the candidates with the rest of the jury and get their insights, which was very, very interesting to see how different people think about the same issues. And again, it was very interesting to have those discussions and discuss each individual person and then take a call on whether we felt that they were good enough among the list of such eminent candidates who applied to be in the top 40. So I think a very rewarding experience from my standpoint. I really benefited from it. And I hope that as the evening progresses and as some of you do get shortlisted, and as all of you who are watching it are also able to make out, it will hopefully be very rewarding for all of you as well. So inevitably, I must say that there were about more than 100 people who applied for this award. And that itself is a very good number, and I think speaks to the importance with which this whole exercise was taken by the HR fraternity. Choosing 40 was not an easy task because all of you are so highly qualified, so versatile, so impressive, that choosing just 40 became a very difficult task. And maybe we should have had the top 70 under 40 or something like that to make the process a little bit easier for us as the jury members. But alas, that was not to be the case, and we had to ultimately choose 40 of you. I'm very impressed with the lot that we have chosen, and I think my fellow jury members were as well. The other very heartening thing that I was able to observe is the fact that a number of our candidates that we've selected are actually women, and I think more than 50% actually are women. And that's really very heartening to see the kind of participation that we had from the women in this whole selection process, and the fact that so many of them were so qualified and so impressive that we ended up, I think, choosing more than half, I think, are in fact women. So I think that's a very, very positive thing. I should also say that, as I said earlier, also that the whole lot of candidates was extremely smart, very multi-talented, very versatile, very skilled, and very diverse. And so I would say that while we've chosen 40, those of you who did not make the cut, please do not get disheartened. As I said, it was very, very difficult for us to make the decision of the top 40. All of you are very talented and qualified, and I would urge you to keep going in whatever are your respective careers, wherever you're working, and then reapply later, and I'm sure that you'll get selected in the years to come. So let me move on from the actual process that we went through and talk a little bit about my experience as a business person, and having been very closely involved with building a large organization now. Uh, what is it that I see as the role of HR, not just right now, but just in general, and what is the role that an HR professional can play in building an organization? And here I'd like to say the following, that, especially let me recognize the time that we're in right now, which is the COVID time period. And especially in this time, I think the role of an HR person becomes even much more important, because everybody right now is working from home, and the connectedness that people had, the face-to-face interaction that people had, the physical cues that you could pick up interacting with people, all of those are missing. And while we are able to keep moving forward and keep working on the basis of the virtual platforms, the reality is we're missing that human interaction and that human connect. And I think this is where HR has to figure out what is the right way to keep people motivated during this time period, and how to keep people connected during this time period to the rest of the organization. Also keep in mind that this is a difficult time for everybody, including for all of you. Nobody has been used to staying and working from home for such a long period of time, and being away from normal routines, normal work habits, and so on. And I'm sure it's having an impact also on the mental health of people. And again, I think that is something that HR professionals have to very early recognize in their employees, and then be able to address those kinds of issues. So I think it's not just a question of providing motivation to people who are sitting all far away from each other and interacting only on virtual platforms, but also really getting deep into people's mindset and seeing how they're doing, how they're thinking, how healthy they are mentally, and being able to carry out doing their work. And this becomes especially harder in large organizations where people are all over the place, and where people used to interact a lot with each other in the past. I think so. It's really I think it's providing a very different dimension to the work that HR professionals have to be doing. Um, it also shows, I think, to some extent, that the world is a very uncertain place, and we are having the COVID crisis right now. There could be other crises in the future. Of course, it's a very significant black swan event of the kind that has not really happened, at least in my working life. But I've also seen the fact that different crises are coming and hitting us in the corporate world. There was a global financial crisis that hit us in 2008. There was the tech bubble bursting that happened just 8-10 years before that. And now 8 to 10 years later, we have the COVID crisis. So the reality is that every 8 to 10 years, you are seeing some fairly distinct and different crisis that is emerging, which has, in some cases, very different ramifications from earlier crises. And so therefore, what, at least to me, emerges very clearly is that you cannot just be reacting while the crisis is happening. You have to be building your organization, and really building the connect within the organization at all points in time. And I think in this, what is very critical is the culture of the organization that you build, the vision that is there within the organization, and how strongly does it bind all the employees together. How aligned are the employees behind whatever is the vision of the company? Because at times like this, when you're sitting all far away from each other and the normal forms of interaction are just not possible, it is that culture, it is that feeling of oneness It is that feeling of being connected to a vision, if not to other people physically around you, that becomes really critical. And in that, the HR function has a very important role to play, because to me, the HR function really is the custodian of creating the right culture. Of course, working with the leadership of the organization. But fundamentally, the HR organization has to take the lead in doing that, and creating this very strong bedrock, with a very clear morale, with a very clear sense of vision, in some ways is very, very critical. And the importance of that is really highlighted in crises like this. In our case itself, for example, we in our company we have about 1,300 people, uh, and we've hired more than 100 people since the start of the lockdown. And these 100 people have never showed up at an office because we've all been working from home for so many months. So these 125 people that we've hired during the pendency of the lockdown, how do you, basically induct these people? How do you give them a sense of what the culture of the organization is? How do you give them a sense of the mission of the organization? And I think those challenges are, of course, very unique to the time that we're in right now. But having very strong processes and systems and culture, and that becomes very important. It is very critical, therefore, for the HR folks to keep working in that direction. So while, of course, all of us recognize that that's an important aspect, I think the importance of it is getting even further emphasized in times like this. The other thing I would say as point number 2 is, how is the HR function going to evolve over time? And here I would like to mention a couple of things. Number one is the fact that, HR is not a function that is divorced from all the other functions within the firm. It is not divorced from the strategy of the firm. It is an integral part of the rest of the company. It is an integral part of the vision, the strategy, the future direction that the company is trying to embark towards. And it's very important for the HR people within the organization to understand that. Because if you don't understand that, and if you don't understand business issues, you will not be able to give the right advice, the right strategic advice to the CEO. And it's not good enough for an HR person to say that, look, as long as I am doing the work that I'm supposed to do, whether it's compensation and benefits, whether it's learning and development, whether it is any other operational aspect of HR, doing that is not sufficient any longer. You really have to understand what is the CEO's vision, where is the company heading towards, and what kind of people challenges may come up in the organization as you grow. How are the different senior management pulling together as a team? Are there weak chinks or weak links within the organization? Are people not working well with each other? Because in my experience, it is really those kinds of things where you really look at how well people work with each other, how aligned are they with each other, that really determine whether the company ends up doing well or does poorly. And how much politics is there within the organization as well. How engaged are people, how motivated are they across the different levels of the organization. And that is something that many CEOs don't necessarily think about as deeply as they need to. And therefore that knowledge and that awareness of what is happening within the company, how are different people thinking at different levels of the organization, how are different people working with the different parts of the organization, what kind of team spirit exists, what kind of collaborativeness exists. If that feedback is not fed back or given back to the CEO might end up making wrong choices. He or she may end up putting more pressure on the organization than the organization is able to handle. And so therefore, being able to think about those strategic issues and be able to give that feedback to the CEO is, I think, a very, very important and critical role of HR people. And I think that's something that goes over and above just the day-to-day aspects of doing HR. And I think that is really where HR people can really add a lot of value, which goes over and above the day-to-day job description. And I think your business people will value that kind of feedback a lot more. All the other stuff that an HR person normally does is really at this point hygiene. If you're doing that, that's great, but nobody is going to give you any extra marks for that. It's really a lot of extra value add that you do right? For that, you need to keep your eyes and ears open. You need to sit in senior management meetings. You need to understand what are the different issues and important factors that the CEO is trying to drive towards. You have to see the interaction that is happening between the different teams and between the different senior people, and really draw out from there your own learnings of how all of these interactions, this collaboration, this culture building, and so on can really, really be improved. So I think that's an area that I would really say that all of you young HR people, some of you I'm sure are already getting to leadership roles within the HR function, really should try to understand and imbibe. So really understand the business from a strategic standpoint extremely well. Because if you don't understand that, you will not be able to grow, you'll not be able to give the right kind of guidance. So that's one thing I thought I should share with you. The second thing I want to share with you is that I have in my experience over the last 10 years been building a business from scratch. And as you build a business from scratch, you go through different evolutionary stages. In the first stage, you may just be at a point where you're trying to hire people, your organization may not be well established, may not be well known, and there are certain challenges, therefore, to even just getting good people on board. At that point in time, you also have to put in place the basic structure, the basic culture, the basic organization framework, and some of the basic processes as well at that point in time. As you grow the organization, as the business builds, there are many other unique challenges that get thrown up. And those are challenges, again, that you have to be really sensitive to. And again, these are things that nobody is going to teach you. Either you have those powers of observation, either you have those skill sets, either you have that understanding of people, or you don't. And as an HR person, you need to have that understanding of people. That's, to me, an absolute critical factor. So as the organization grows, we all know that the people who basically helped you grow the organization in the beginning are not necessarily the best people for the organization as the organization becomes bigger. Because maybe people reach the end of their bandwidth. But it's not just that. People can also reach the end of their ability to work collaboratively with bigger teams of people. People can also reach the end of their ability in being able to just communicate beyond the point. Or they may reach the end of their ability in being able to understand and train their next level of people. And if they are not able to do that, then they are not able to scale themselves up. And as the organization becomes bigger, everybody has to scale up. And if those things are not recognized by people, then unfortunately, they may not be the right people to take you forward. And so while we've read all of this, that as organizations scale up, different people become less important to the growth, and you have to get new talent to come in. How do you manage the people who've been there from the beginning with the new talent that is coming in the future? The new talent will come in and they'll have the view that they are thinking about the future, whereas the older guys are thinking, oh, we are the guys who got this company to this point. And before you know it, you will have an us versus them mentality, with the old guys thinking one way, the new guys thinking a different way, and that leads to all sorts of dysfunctionalities. And what I have discovered in my own organization is that even though I have built this organization brick by brick and person by person almost, unbeknownst to me, and very interestingly, my organization has a life of its own. It's a living, breathing, organic entity. And sometimes I'm surprised by its characteristics, its way of behaving. Those are not things necessarily that I intended to have happen, but they have happened across the organization. And sometimes I don't agree with the way the organization thinks and behaves, or the kind of culture that has emerged in the organization. And so therefore, as a leader, I have to always very deeply think about these organizational issues. For example, one of the simple things that emerged in my company was that we hired a certain set of people at a certain point in time, and then it became a question of promotion. And when it came to a question of promotion, we realized that if we promote one person and not the other people who were hired at the same time, while we would recognize one person, 5 other people might feel de-recognized or unrecognized. And that may lead to a more negative situation for us than a positive situation. And so we promoted everybody. And over a period of time, over the period of the last 4 or 5 years, what I have discovered is that now this culture of getting a promotion has actually become deeply ingrained in the system. And before I knew it, we were ending up becoming almost like a bureaucratic organization where your promotions and your recognitions are more time bound than they are based on performance. And now I'm having to take a real step back and really try to figure out how do we need to have a more meritocratic organization, or do we need to have a more bureaucratic organization? What is more important for us as a company, just given our own business exigencies? And if we come to the conclusion that we probably will, that we need to be a more meritocratic organization, then what are the things that we need to do as a company to move from an organization that is more, let's say, time-bound and meritocratic in nature, bureaucratic in nature, to becoming much more meritocratic? Is it that we now promote different people at different speeds? Is it that we give different levels of rewards or some other recognition, or we change salary levels? And what happens if the attendant consequence of that is that certain people do not feel recognized adequately and do end up leaving? Are we okay with taking the consequences of people leaving us? And so there are all sorts of those kinds of issues that come up. And what kind of impact might it have on morale or on our intellectual property if people suddenly start leaving us? Some of these people might be in important positions. So how do we protect our intellectual property? And what kind of culture then are we trying to perpetuate? Are we trying to say that we are, along with meritocracy comes a hire and fire culture, or a promotion and up or out culture? So what sort of a culture do we want to therefore create within the company? These become issues and questions that don't have any right or wrong answer. And we just have to find what we think is the best answer for us at a given point in time. And that is why, the role of HR becomes so important again. Because, at least for me as the CEO of the company, I will lean to the HR head of my company to really give me a lot of very good inputs in these areas. And if I don't get those inputs, then I would say that at least my HR function is not delivering to me what I require from it. And so therefore, all the other things that an HR person needs to do, as I said earlier, are really hygiene factors. It is really these strategic issues, these really deep culture issues, I think, where the true value add of an HR person really thinks or really resides. Now, a lot of those things will not surface to you where you are in your evolution as a professional, maybe under 40 or significantly under 40. But certainly as you become senior, those issues will become more and more important. The last thing I would say to all of you is that, in India, entrepreneurship, unfortunately, is not as well recognized as it should be. We do not treat failure in the way it should be treated. We treat failure as failure, whereas we should actually treat failure as a learning opportunity. And the fact that somebody has tried something and has not succeeded, to me, it means that there are actually people who are willing to put themselves out there, who are willing to take certain risks with their lives, who are willing to push into a different path. And we need, in all of our respective organizations, people like that. So if you and your respective organizations have the ability of hiring somebody who's tried something and that has not worked, don't look down on them, because at least they've tried something different. They've taken the less trodden path. And so therefore, if they are looking for a job, give them a job, because they'll provide something different to you in your organization. The other thing I would say is that in your career, and since you guys are only less than 40 right now, I would say what is going to be very important in your respective lives to succeed is really a simple thing like ambition. What do you want to be, or what do you want to do with your life? If you want to have a comfortable life, not really put yourself out into a difficult area and not take risk, that's perfectly fine. But believe me when I say that you will not do anything unique in your life if you follow that path. And so therefore, I would say, please have the ambition of doing something fundamentally different. Take risks with your life, because that is the only way in which you're going to get ahead from all the other people out there. You guys are in the top 40, and that is terrific, right? But at some point, you'll have to be in the top 20, then in the top 10, then in the top 5. And believe me, that road gets harder and harder and harder, because you're now competing with the guys who are in the top 40. They're all very smart guys, right? And so therefore, the race to get higher and faster and further gets narrower and harder as you go forward. And so therefore having drive and ambition on a sustained basis is really what is going to differentiate you over a long time in your career as an HR professional or as anything else for that matter. The last thing I would say is work for companies that are involved in nation building. This country needs it, and we're all citizens of our country. We all need to help in making sure that we do our little bit or bigger bit, whatever it might be, but we need to do our bit in helping this country prosper and in helping this country do well. I'm doing my bit as best as I can understand in helping develop more and more clean energy, which allows us to meet the power needs of the country in a cheap, sustainable manner. And at the same time, we're trying to address climate change, right? So that's the path that I have chosen. Now, you all have to choose whatever your paths are and try to really move forward on that basis and try to be part of an organized part, try to be part of a team that really believes in building a great company and contribute to that building of that great company. Because I think that really is very fundamentally important. We as a country need it. And the very last thing I would tell all of you guys is something that one of the candidates had talked about, which is that he wants to become eventually the CEO of his company. And I think that's an ambition that all you HR people should be having. Why should you not go off and become the CEO? Why should a business person become the CEO? Why should a finance person become the CEO? I think ultimately what really delivers great businesses are great organizations. And great organizations is really best understood by the HR people. So if you can get into strategy, if you can get an understanding of finance, there'll be nobody better equipped and better armed than a really good HR person to really become the leader of an organization. So don't set your sights low. Don't rule anything out. Shoot for the stars. And I can assure you that all of you will end up doing very well. Thank you.